Welcome back to my channel, Read by Angelique. I am Angelique, and today we are going to continue to read The Phantom of the Opera. We are currently on chapter 13. For a quick recap from the last video, we read chapter 12, which was extremely fun and entertaining. So at this point, Raoul and Christine have kind of confessed their love for each other in very serious terms, and Christine is no longer convinced that the Angel of Music exists. Christine takes Raoul to the top of the opera house outside, and they're sitting down, and she tells him what happened when she disappeared for I can't remember, it was like 4 weeks. But she had disappeared. And so she confesses where she went. So the Phantom tricks her into following him into the dungeons, or not the dungeons, into these secret tunnels and passages under the opera house. It's like 5 to 7 floors underneath the opera house. It's like this illusion that she almost walks through a mirror and finds herself in this place, and she freaks out because the voice she's hearing is the voice of the Angel of Music, but the face that she sees is the phantom or the ghost of the opera house, and she had never put those two together. She's like, they can't be the same thing, nor can the ghost, because she never believed in the ghost, but she believed in the Angel of Music. So he takes her on this really long journey underground. First, she's riding Caesar, the white horse, and then he takes her off the horse, puts her in a boat, rows her to this little beach place where he's made a home. And the way she describes it, he's filled it with white flowers. And the way she describes it, it's beautiful. But Christine's like, it's just a home. I know the price of every single thing there. I know where he got his flowers. The mystery, the enchantment, the angelic aura of the Angel of Music is shattered. And he's professes his love to her. And at first she's completely rejecting him. And but then he says she's free to go. She doesn't leave for a little while, and then he shows her around his house and things. He walks her into his room, and he's like, my room is strange because I sleep in a coffin. What? Craziness. He shows her what he's been working on, this project. He's been writing this piece, and it's called Don Juan Triumphant. And she asks, can you play it for me? And he's like, no, if I play it for you, you would never be able to leave. It would torment you what I've played, what I play for you. So I'm not going to play for you, but I'll play an opera. And he kind of laughs and chuckles, playing an opera is almost beneath him. But he plays, and it's absolutely beautiful. And while he's playing, Christine just gets this urge to rip off his mask, which he has sworn her, you cannot take off my mask. If you take off my mask, you will not leave here. That's the threat. But at this point, she's still free to go. But the urge to take it off is so strong while he's playing this opera, which is beautiful. She takes it off really fast, and he has this face of a skull, but it's animated because he's alive in some way. It's completely gross. She freaks out, and he is furious and just starts saying all these mean things, and she runs out of the room. He stays in there, but then he starts playing his Don Juan Triumphant, and she knows. She stops running away because she's just so captivated by the music. And as soon as she hears it, she knows what it is. It's the very music that he said that he would never play for her, because if once she hears it, she will basically be consumed by the music and wouldn't be able to leave. And she realizes then, I can't leave this place. I won't be able to leave. And he comes out of the room, but she hatches a plan. She's like, I'm going to try to convince him that I am loyal, that I love him. So he comes out of his room and she was like, that was your music. It's the most beautiful thing. I love you. Like, I'm here. And so she commits to stay with him and tries to earn his trust and favor. And she does eventually. And that's why she's seen riding in the coach, because he starts giving her more freedoms and going with her and doing different things. And eventually kind of gives her, liberty, and convinces the ghost that she can be friends with Raoul, that she does not love him. And the rule is that she can only see Raoul at the theater, and she can't leave the theater. So that's kind of where we ended. Raoul is confused because at one point she does leave, but she doesn't leave completely. Like, she returns to Raoul. So she's like, if Raoul asks her if the ghost was beautiful, if Eric was beautiful and not ugly, would you love him and not me? And she professes his love, and she's like, of course I'd love you. But she only says it in a way essentially she says, kiss me, and tries to prove it to him. And so they kiss. But she's so scared of Eric, and the plan is that she's gonna sing the next night, and that's gonna be her last time, and they're gonna run away together. But all this time, there's been this dark angel thing in the shadows. I wonder who that is. And he's been eavesdropping. Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux, Chapter 13, The Master Stroke. Raoul and Christine ran and ran, eager to escape from the rooftop and the blazing eyes that showed only in the dark, and they did not stop before they came to the 8th floor on the way down. There was no performance at the opera that night, and the passages were empty. Suddenly, a queer-looking form stood before them and blocked the road. No, not this way. And the form pointed to another passage by which they were to reach the wings. Raoul wanted to stop and ask for an explanation, but the form, which wore a sort of long frock coat and a pointed cap, said, "Quick, go away, quickly." Christine was already dragging Raoul along, compelling him to start running again. "But who is he? Who is that man?" he asked. Christine replied, "It's the Persian." "What's he doing here?" "I don't know. He is always in the opera." "You are making me run away for the first time in my life. If we really saw Eric, what I ought to have done was to nail him to Apollo's lyre, just as we nail the owls to the walls of our Breton farms, and there would have been no more question of him." "My dear Raoul, you would first have had to climb up to Apollo's lyre. That is no easy matter." The blazing eyes were there. "Oh, you are getting like me now, seeing him everywhere. What we took for blazing eyes was probably a couple of stars shining through the strings of the lyre." And Christine went down another floor, with Raoul following her. "As you have quite made up your mind to go, Christine, I assure you it would be better to go at once. Why wait for tomorrow? He may have heard us tonight." No, he is working, I tell you, at his Don Juan triumphant, and not thinking of us." "You are so sure that you keep on looking behind you." "Come to my dressing room. Hadn't we better meet outside the opera?" "Never, till we go away for good. It would bring us bad luck if I did not keep my word. I promised him to see you nowhere but here." It is a good thing for me that he allowed you to do as much as that. Do you know, said Raoul bitterly, that it was very plucky of you to let us play at being engaged? Why, my dear, he knows all about it. He said, I trust you, Christine. Monsieur Raoul de Chagny is in love with you, and is going abroad. Before he goes, I want him to be as unhappy as I am. Are people so unhappy when they love? Yes, Christine, when they love and are not sure of being loved. They came to Christine's dressing room. Why do you think that you are safer in this room than on the stage? Asked Raoul. You heard him through the walls, therefore he can hear us. No, he gave me his word not to be behind the walls of my dressing room again, and I believe Eric's word. This room and my bedroom on the lake are for me, exclusively, and not to be approached by him. How can you have gone from this room into a dark passage, Christine? Suppose we try to repeat your movements, shall we? It is dangerous, dear, for the glass might carry me off again, and instead of running away, I should be obliged to go to the end of the secret passage to the lake, and there call Eric. Would he hear you? Eric will hear me wherever I call him. He told me so. He is a very curious genius. You must not think, Raoul, that he is simply a man who amuses himself by living underground. He does things that no other man could do. He knows things which nobody in the world knows. Take care, Christine. You are making a ghost of him again. No, he is not a ghost. He is a man of heaven and earth. That is all. A man of heaven and earth. That is all. A nice way to speak of him. And are you still resolved to run away from him? Yes, tomorrow. Tomorrow. You will have no resolve left. Then, Raoul, you must run away with me in spite of myself. Is that understood? I shall be here at 12 tomorrow night. I shall keep my promise, whatever happens. You say that after listening to the performance, he is to wait for you in the dining room on the lake. Yes. And how are you to reach him, if you don't know how to go out by the glass? Why, by going straight to the edge of the lake. Christine opened a box, took out an enormous key, and showed it to Raoul. What is that? He asked. The key of the gate to the underground passage in the Rue Scribe. I understand, Christine. It leads straight to the lake. Give it to me, Christine, will you? Never, she said. That would be treachery. Suddenly, Christine changed color. A mortal pallor overspread her features. Oh, heaven, she cried. Eric, Eric, have pity on me. Hold your tongue, said Raoul. You told me he could hear you. But the singer's attitude became more and more inexplicable. She wrung her fingers, repeated with a distraught air, Oh, heaven, oh, heaven. But what is it? What is it? Raoul implored. The ring. The gold ring he gave me. Oh, so Eric gave you that ring? You know he did, Raoul. But what you don't know is that when he gave it to me, he said, I give you back your liberty, Christine, on condition that this ring is always on your finger. As long as you keep it, you will be protected against all danger, and Eric will remain your friend. But woe to you if ever you part with it, for Eric will have his revenge. My dear, the ring is gone. Woe upon us. They both looked for the ring, but could not find it. Christine refused to be pacified. It was well I gave you that kiss up above, under Apollo's lyre, she said. The ring must have slipped from my finger and dropped into the street. We can never find it. And what misfortunes are in store for us now? Oh, to run away. Let us run away at once, Raoul insisted once more. She hesitated. He thought that she was going to say yes. Then her bright pupils became dimmed, and she said, No, tomorrow. And she left him hurriedly, still wringing and rubbing her fingers, as though she hoped to bring the ring back like that. Raoul went home, greatly perturbed at all that he had heard. If I don't save her from the hands of that humbug, he said aloud as he went to bed, she is lost. But I will save her. He put out his lamp and felt a need to insult Eric in the dark. Thrice over he shouted, Humbug! 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 But suddenly he raised himself on his elbow. A cold sweat poured from his temples. Two eyes, like blazing coals, had appeared at the foot of his bed. They stared at him fixedly, terribly, in the darkness of the night. Raoul was no coward, and yet he trembled. He put out a groping, hesitating, uncertain hand toward the table by his bedside. He found the matches and lit his candle. The eyes disappeared. Still uneasy in his mind, he thought to himself, "She told me that his eyes only showed in the dark. His eyes have disappeared in the light, but he may still be here." And he rose, hunted about, went round the room. He looked under his bed like a child, then he thought himself absurd, got into bed again and blew out the candle. The eyes reappeared. He sat up and stared back at them with all the courage he possessed. Then he cried, "Is that you, Eric? Man, genius, or ghost? Is it you?" He reflected. If it's he's on the balcony. Then he ran to the chest of drawers and groped for his revolver. He opened the balcony window, looked out, saw nothing, and closed the window again. He went back to bed, shivering, for the night was cold, and put the revolver on the table within his reach. The eyes were still there, at the foot of the bed. Were they between the bed and the window pane, or behind the pane? That is to say, on the balcony. That was what Raoul wanted to know. He also wanted to know if those eyes belonged to a human being. He wanted to know everything. Then, patiently, calmly, he seized his revolver and took aim. He aimed a little bit above the two eyes. Surely, if they were eyes, and if above those two eyes there was a forehead, and if Raoul was not too clumsy. The shot made a terrible noise amid the silence of the slumbering house, and wild footsteps came hurrying along the passages. Raoul sat up with outstretched arm, ready to fire again if need be. This time the two eyes had disappeared. Servants appeared, carrying lights. Count Philippe, terribly anxious. "What is it?" "I think I have been dreaming," replied the younger man. "I fired at 2 stars that kept me from sleeping." "You're raving. Are you ill? For God's sake, tell me, Raoul, what happened?" And the Count seized hold of the revolver. No, I'm not raving. Besides, we shall soon see." He got out of bed, put on the dressing gown and slippers, took a light from the hands of the servant, and opened the window, stepped out on the balcony. The Count saw that the window had been pierced by a bullet at a man's height. Raoul was leaning over the balcony with his candle. "Ah," he said, blood, here, there, more blood. That's a good thing. A ghost who bleeds is less dangerous," he grinned. Raoul! The Count was shaking him as though he were trying to waken a sleepwalker. "But, my dear brother, I'm not asleep," Raoul protested impatiently. "You can see the blood for yourself. I thought I had been dreaming, and firing at 2 stars. It was Eric's eyes, and here is his blood. After all, perhaps I was wrong to shoot, and Christine is quite capable of never forgiving me. All this would not have happened if I had drawn the curtains before going to bed." "Raoul, have you suddenly gone mad? Wake up!" "What, again? You would do better to help me find Eric, for, after all, a ghost who bleeds can always be found." The Count's valet said, "That is so, sir. There is blood on the balcony." The other manservant brought a lamp, by the light of which they examined the balcony carefully. The marks of blood followed the rail till they reached a gutter spout. Then they went up the gutter spout. "My dear fellow," said Count Philippe, "you have fired at a cat." "The misfortune is," said Raoul with a grin, "that it's quite possible. With Eric you never know. Is it Eric? Is it the cat? Is it the ghost? No, with Eric you can't tell." Raoul went on making these strange remarks, which corresponded so intimately and logically with the distractions of his brain, and which, at the same time, tended to persuade many people that his mind was unhinged. The Count himself was seized with this idea, and later the examining magistrate, on receiving the report of the commissary of police, came to the same conclusion. "Who is Eric?" asked the Count, pressing his brother's hand. "He is my rival, and he is not dead. It's a pity." He dismissed the servants with a wave of the hand, and the 2 Cheneys were left alone. But the men were not out of earshot before the Count's valet heard Raoul say, distinctly and emphatically, I shall carry off Christine Daae tonight. This phrase was afterwards repeated to Monsieur Foire, the examining magistrate, but no one ever knew exactly what passed between the two brothers at this interview. The servants declared that this was not their first quarrel. Their voices penetrated the wall, and it was always an actress called Christine Daae that was in question. At breakfast, the early morning breakfast, which the Count took in his study, Philip sent for his brother. Raoul arrived silent and gloomy. The scene was a very short one. Philip handed his brother a copy of the Epoch and said, "Read that." The Viscount read. The latest news in the Faubourg is that there is a promise of marriage between Christine Daae, the opera singer, and Monsieur le Vicomte Raoul de Chagny. If the gossips are to be believed, Count Philip has sworn that, for the first time on record, the Chagnys shall not keep their promise. But as love is all-powerful at the opera, and even more than elsewhere, we wonder how Count Philip intends to prevent the Viscount, his brother, from leading the new Margarita to the altar. The two brothers are said to adore each other, but the Count is curiously mistaken if he imagines that brotherly love will triumph over love pure and simple. "You see, Raoul," said the Count, "you are making us ridiculous. That little girl has turned your head with her ghost stories." The Viscount had evidently repeated Christine's narrative to his brother during the night. All that he now said was, "Goodbye, Philip. Have you quite made up your mind? Are you going tonight? You are going tonight, with her?" No reply. "Surely you will not do anything so foolish. Mind you, I shall know how to prevent you." "Goodbye, Philip," the Viscount repeated, and left the room. This scene was described to the examining magistrate by the Count himself, who did not see Raoul again until that evening at the opera, a few minutes before Christine's disappearance. Raoul, in fact, devoted the whole day to his preparations for flight. The horses, the carriage, the coachman, the provisions, the luggage, the money required for the journey, the road to be taken. He had resolved not to go by train, so as to throw the ghost off the scent. All this had to be settled and provided for, and it occupied him until 9 o'clock at night. At 9 o'clock, a sort of travelling barouche, with the curtains of its windows close drawn, took its place in the rank on the rotunda side. It was drawn by two powerful horses, driven by a coachman whose face was almost concealed in the long folds of a muffler. In front of this travelling carriage were three beaux-armes, belonging respectively to Carlotta, who had suddenly returned to Paris, to Sorelli, and at the head of the rank, to the Comte Philippe de Chagny. No one left the barouche. The coachman remained on his box, and the three other coachmen remained on theirs. A shadow in a long black cloak and a soft black felt hat passed along the pavement between the rotunda and the carriages, examined the barouche carefully, went up to the horses and the coachman, and then moved away without saying a word. The magistrate afterwards believed that this shadow was that of the Vicomte Raoul de Chagny, but I do not agree, seeing that that evening, as every evening, the Vicomte de Chagny was wearing a tall hat, which hat, besides, was subsequently found. I am more inclined to think that the shadow was that of the ghost, who knew all about the business, as the reader will soon learn. They were giving Faust, as it happened, to a splendid house. The Faubourg was magnificently represented, and the paragraph in that morning's Epoch had already produced its effect, for all eyes were turned to the box in which Count Philip sat alone, apparently in a very indifferent and careless frame of mind. The feminine element in the brilliant audience seemed curiously puzzled, and the Viscount's absence gave rise to any amount of whispering behind the fans. Christine Daae met with a rather cold reception. That very special audience could not forgive her for aiming so high. The singer noticed this unfavorable attitude of a portion of the house and was confused by it. The regular frequenters of the opera, who pretended to know the truth about the Viscount's love story, exchanged significant smiles at certain passages in Margarita's part, and they made a show of turning and looking at Philip de Chagny's box when Christine sang. I wish I could but know who was he that addressed me, if he was noble, or, at least, what his name is. The Count sat with his chin on his hand and seemed to pay no attention to these manifestations. He kept his eyes fixed on the stage, but his thoughts appeared to be far away. Christine lost her self-assurance more and more. She trembled. She felt on the verge of a breakdown. Carolus Fanta wondered if she was ill, if she should keep the stage until the end of the garden act. In the front of the house, people remembered the catastrophe that had befallen Carlotta at the end of that act in the historic quack, which had momentarily interrupted her career in Paris. Just then, Carlotta made her entrance in a box facing the stage, a sensational entrance. Poor Christine raised her eyes upon this fresh subject of excitement. She recognized her rival. She thought she saw a sneer on her lips. That saved her. She forgot everything in order to triumph once more. From that moment, the prima donna sang with all her heart and soul. She tried to surpass all that she had done till then, and she succeeded. In the last act, when she began the invocation to the angels, she made all the members of the audience feel as though they too had wings. In the center of the amphitheater, a man stood up and remained standing, facing the singer. It was Raoul. Holy angel in heaven blessed. And Christine, her arms outstretched, her throat filled with music, the glory of her hair falling over her bare shoulders, uttered the divine cry, My spirit longs with thee to rest. It was at this moment that the stage was suddenly plunged into darkness. It happened so quickly that the spectators hardly had time to utter a sound of stupefaction, for the gas at once lit the stage again, but Christine Daae was no longer there. What had become of her? What was the miracle? All exchanged glances without understanding, and the excitement at once reached its height, nor was the tension any less great on the stage itself. Men rushed from the wings to the spot where Christine had been singing that very instant. The performance was interrupted amid the greatest disorder. Where had Christine gone? What witchcraft had snatched her away before the eyes of thousands of enthusiastic onlookers and from the arms of Carolus Fanta himself? It was as though the angels had really carried her up to rest. Raoul, still standing up in the amphitheater, had given a cry. Count Philip had sprung to his feet in his box. People looked at the stage, at the Count, at Raoul, and wondered if this curious event were connected in any way with a paragraph in that morning's paper. But Raoul hurriedly left his seat. The Count disappeared from his box, and while the curtain was lowered, the subscribers rushed to the door that led behind the scenes. The rest of the audience waited amid an indescribable hubbub. Everyone spoke at once. Everyone tried to suggest an explanation of the extraordinary incident. At last the curtain rose slowly, and Carolus Fanta stepped to the conductor's desk and, in a sad and serious voice, said, Ladies and gentlemen, an unprecedented event has taken place and thrown us into a state of the greatest alarm. Our sister artist, Christine Daae, has disappeared before our eyes, and nobody can tell us how. Oh, so exciting! Let's continue on to chapter 14, The Safety Pin. Behind the curtain there was an indescribable crowd. Artists, scene shifters, dancers, suppers, choristers, subscribers were all asking questions, shouting and hustling one another. What became of her? She's run away. With the Vicomte de Cheny, of course. No, with the Count. Ah, here's Carlotta. Carlotta did the trick. No, it was the ghost. And a few laughed, especially as a careful examination of the trapdoors and boards had put the idea of an accident out of the question. Amid the noisy throng, 3 men stood talking in a low voice and with despairing gestures. They were Gabriel, the course master, Morsier, the acting manager, and Remy, the secretary. They retired to a corner of the lobby by which the stage communicates with the wide passage leading to the foyer of the ballet. Here they stood and argued behind some enormous properties. I knocked at the door, said Remy. They did not answer. Perhaps they are not in their office. In any case, it's impossible to find out, for they took the keys with them. They were obviously the managers who had given orders during the last entr'acte when they were not to be disturbed on any pretext whatever, and were not in to anybody. All the same, exclaimed Gabriel, a singer isn't run away with from the middle of the stage every day. Did you shout that to them? Asked Mercer. I'll go back again, said Remy, and disappeared at a run. Thereupon the stage manager arrived in a great state of flurry. Well, Monsieur Mercer, are you coming? What are you two doing here? We're waiting. You're wanted, Mr. Acting Manager. I refuse to do anything or to know anything before the commissary arrives, declared Mercer. I have sent for Mifroid. We shall see when he comes. And I tell you that you ought to go down to the organ at once. Not before the commissary comes. I've been down to the organ myself. Ah, and what did you see? Well, I saw nobody. Do you hear? Nobody. What do you want me to do down there? You're right, said the stage manager, frantically pushing his hands through his rebellious hair. You're right. But there might be someone at the organ who could tell us how the stage came to be suddenly dark. Now, Mauclair is not to be found. Do you understand that? Mauclair was the gas man who dispensed light and darkness on the opera stage. Mauclair is not to be found, repeated Mercer, taken aback. Well, what about his assistant? There's no Mauclair and no assistants. No one at the lights, I tell you. You can imagine, roared the stage manager, that little woman must have been carried off by somebody. She didn't run away by herself. It was a thought out piece of business, and we've got to find out about it. And what are the managers doing all of this time, I say? I gave orders that no one was to go down to the lights, and I posted a fireman in front of the gasman's box beside the organ. Wasn't that right? Yes, quite right. And now let's wait for the commissary. The stage manager walked away, shrugging his shoulders, fuming, muttering insults at those milksops who remained quietly squatting in a corner while the whole theatre was topsy-turvy. Gabriel and Mercer were not so quiet as all that. Only they had received an order that paralyzed them. The managers were not to be disturbed on any account. Remy had violated that order and met with no success. At that moment he returned from his new expedition wearing a curiously startled air. Well, have you seen them? Asked Mercer. Moncharmin opened the door at last. His eyes were starting out of his head. I thought he meant to strike me. I could not get a word in, and what do you think he shouted at me? Have you a safety pin? No. Well then, clear out. I tried to tell him that an extraordinary thing had happened on the stage, but he roared, A safety pin? Give me a safety pin at once. A boy heard him. He was bellowing like a bull, ran up with a safety pin and gave it to him, whereupon Moncharmin slammed the door in my face, and there you are. And couldn't you have said, Christine Daae, I should like to have seen you in my place. He was foaming at the mouth. He thought of nothing but his safety pin. I believe, if they hadn't brought him one, he would have fallen down in a fit. Oh, all that isn't normal, and our managers are going mad. Besides, it can't go on like this. I'm not used to being treated in that fashion. Suddenly, Gabriel whispered, It's another trick of the OGs. Opera ghosts. Remy gave a grin, Mercer a sigh, and seemed about to speak, but, meeting Gabriel's eye, said nothing. However, Mercer felt his responsibility increase as the minutes passed without the managers appearing, and, at last, he could stand it no longer. Look here, I'll go and hunt them out myself. Gabriel, turning very gloomy and serious, stopped him. Be careful what you are doing, Mercer. If they're staying in their office, it's probably because they've got to. OG has more than one trick up his sleeve. But Mercer shook his head. That's their lookout. I'm going. If people had listened to me, the police would have known everything long ago. and he went. What's everything? Asked Remy. What was there to tell the police? Why don't you answer, Gabriel? Ah, so you know something, do you? Well, you'd do better to tell me, too, if you don't want me to shout out that you are all going mad. Yes, that's what you are. Mad! Gabriel put on a stupid look and pretended not to understand the private secretary's unseemly outburst. What something and I am supposed to know, he said. I don't know what you mean. Remy began to lose his temper. This evening, Richard and Moncharmin were behaving like lunatics here, between the acts. I never noticed it, growled Gabriel, very much annoyed. Then you're the only one. Do you think that I didn't see them? And that M. Parabis, the manager of the Credit Central, noticed nothing? And that M. de la Baudraye, the ambassador, has no eyes to see with? Why, all the subscribers were pointing at our managers. But what were our managers doing? Asked Gabriel, putting on his most innocent air. What were they doing? You know better than anyone what they were doing. You were there, and you were watching them, you and Mercier, and you were the only two who didn't laugh. I don't understand. Gabriel raised his arms and dropped them to his side again, which gesture was meant to convey that the question did not interest him. Remy continued. What is the sense of this new mania of theirs? Why won't they have anyone come near them now? What? Won't they have anyone come near them? And they won't let anyone touch them. Really? Have you noticed that they won't let anyone touch them? That is certainly odd. Oh, so you admit it. And high time, too. And then they walk backwards. Backwards? You have seen our managers walk backwards? Why, I thought that only crabs walked backwards. Don't laugh, Gabriel, don't laugh. I'm not laughing, protested Gabriel, looking as solemn as a judge. Perhaps you can tell me this, Gabriel, as you're an intimate friend of the management. When I went up to Monsieur Richard outside the foyer during the garden interval, with my hand out before me, why did Monsieur Moncharmin whisper to me, Go away, go away. Whatever you do, don't touch Monsieur le Directeur. Am I supposed to have an infectious disease? It's incredible. And, a little later, when Monsieur de la Baudraye went up to Monsieur Richard, didn't you see Monsieur Moncharmin fling himself between them and hear him exclaim, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, I entreat you not to touch Monsieur le Directeur. It's terrible. And what was Richard doing meanwhile? What was he doing? Why, you saw him. He turned about, bowed in front of him, though there was nobody in front of him, and withdrew backwards. Backwards? And Moncharmin, behind Richard, also turned about, and, that is, he described a semicircle behind Richard and also walked backwards. And they went like that to the staircase leading to the manager's office. Backwards, backwards, backwards. Well, if they are not mad, will you explain what it meant? Well, if they are not mad, will you explain what it means? Perhaps they are practicing a figure in the ballet, suggested Gabriel, without much conviction in his voice. The secretary was furious at this wretched joke, made at so dramatic a moment. He knit his brows and compressed his lips. Then he put his mouth to Gabriel's ear. Don't be so sly, Gabriel. There are things going on for which you and Mercier are partially responsible. What do you mean? Asked Gabriel. Christine Daae is not the only one who suddenly disappeared tonight. Oh, nonsense. There's no nonsense about it. Perhaps you can tell me why, when Mother Giry came down to the foyer just now, Mercier took her by the hand and hurried her away with him. Really, said Gabriel, I never saw it. You did see it, Gabriel, for you went with Mercier and Mother Giry to Mercier's office. Since then, you and Mercier have been seen, but no one has seen Mother Giry. Do you think we've eaten her? No, but you've locked her up in the office, and anyone passing the office can hear her yelling, Oh, the scoundrels! Oh, the scoundrels! At this point of that singular conversation, Mercier arrived, all out of breath. "There," he said in a gloomy voice. "It's worse than ever." I shouted, "It's a serious matter. Open the door. It's I, Mercer." I heard footsteps. The door opened, and Moncharmin appeared. He was very pale. He said, "What do you want?" I answered, "Someone has run off with Christine Daae." What do you think he said? "And a good job, too." And he shut the door after putting this in my hand. Mercier opened his hand. Remy and Gabriel looked. "The safety pin!" cried Remy. "Strange, strange," muttered Gabriel, who could not help shivering. Suddenly a voice made them all three turn round. "I beg your pardon, gentlemen, but could you tell me where Christine Daae is?" In spite of the serious circumstances, the absurdity of the question would have made them roar with laughter, if they had not caught sight of a face so sorrow-stricken that they were at once seized with pity. It was the Viscount Raoul de Cheney. End of chapter 14. So interesting. We are getting closer and closer to the end. I am still very curious what's happening because I feel like either I forgot the story or it doesn't follow the play and the musical or the movie very much. There's just too much going on. Anyway, until next time, goodbye.